Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence with psychiatrist Bernard David Beitman, MD. Dr. Beitman is the founder of the Coincidence Project. The project encourages people like you to tell each other coincidence stories. To learn more about Dr. Beitman's work, put Connecting with Coincidence in your web browser. You'll find his book, his Psychology Today blog, and the interviews from this podcast. And now your host, Bernard Beitman, MD.
Welcome to Connecting with Coincidence. I am your host, Bernard Beitman, MD. I'm a psychiatrist and I also do psychotherapy. I study meaningful coincidences like synchronicity and serendipity because they're useful and they're possible explanations about how reality works, but they're also a lot of fun. And one of the things I've seen recently is that instead of trying to figure out what it means to me or what it tells me about reality, sometimes coincidences are just fun in themselves. And because I'm curious, they also can provide clues to the workings of consciousness. You can order my new book, Meaningful Coincidences, in the text below. And that's a picture of the cover over my right shoulder. It's been fun getting out, trying to tell people about it, and that effort continues. It's great to do a book tour right from your own house, which is what I'm doing. So this is a coincidence that happened to me on Sunday. I was at a park near here, Riverview Park, and it is next to a river, and it's really was a beautiful autumn day. And I'd gone for a walk with a friend, and I was walking back to my car after a rest along the river. Putting my feet in the mud along the river was a great feeling. And then, okay, it's time to go home. And I saw a woman up ahead as I was going to my car in a wheelchair, and her back was to me. And she was with a woman next to her, probably who was taking care of her. And in parallel, as I was looking at these two women, I was wondering what time it was. And then I thought about maybe asking them what time it was, but nah, I didn't. And as I was walking right past them, near enough to hear them talk, I heard the attendant woman say, "It's 4:36 and we will go in 15 minutes. So the thing I was wondering about got answered for me without having to ask it. It was as if they heard my thoughts, as if I had projected the question out to them. They had heard it and respond to it, and they were ready to be able to think about it too. So it was a dance of three people together. So I get curious about how that happens. Our guest today is Derek Abbey, who's originally from Seattle. He spent 23 years in the United States Marine Corps, serving as an enlisted Marine and an officer, both on the ground and in the air. This included serving as an FA-18 aviator and in the special operations community. I mean, he was into this stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Our first military guest on Connecting with Coincidence. He studied history at Oregon State University for his undergraduate education. He holds an MA in higher education, leadership, and a PhD in leadership studies from the University of San Diego. Today, he is president and chief executive officer of Project Recover. You can get the link in his bio on the podcast site. Well, welcome to the show, Derek.
Thanks, Bernard. It's a pleasure to join you. Congratulations on your new book.
Well, thanks. This leadership thing we'll get to, but I don't know if you're aware of this. There's one guy got a PhD in leadership and synchronicity. Where synchronicity helps leadership. Now, I think you kind of know that, but it got formalized, and he goes around teaching leaders about how to use synchronicity as part of their leadership activities. But what we'll talk about is your leadership and some coincidences that have involved you in Project Recover. So I guess we should start with what is Project Recover, and you could tell us a major coincidence story that had a major impact on you.
Yeah, Project Recover is an organization that's been around in some capacity now for close to 3 decades. And our mission is to search for, locate, document, and ultimately recover Americans missing in action from our previous wars, and had a lot of success doing that. I've been a part of the organization for, almost 19 years now in some capacity. And I became connected to the organization when I was a Marine. It was started by a gentleman named Dr. Pat Scannon, and he started doing this work in the nation of Palau in the South Pacific, initially on his own, and then realized, he might need some help working in the jungles and the waters around Palau, and started bringing in like-minded individuals. And when he was doing this work, he would do a lot of research, interviewing World War II veterans at the time. He'd go to these reunions of World War II squadrons and update them on his work, but also interview the veterans to help locate some of their missing members. And it was at a World War II reunion that I met Pat. I was in a fighter squadron. I had just come back from a deployment overseas. By happenstance, got a phone call that in the ready room one day. It was a World War II veteran who was seeking information about members of the squadron, and we didn't have any information, but I just asked him, why.
By information, what was he seeking?
Contact information for other members of the squadron to invite them to this World War II reunion. And I happened to get the call, and I just asked him, what he wanted the information for and what they were doing. And he says, we're having a reunion in Indiana. And I said, well, I want to go. And so me and a colleague flew out to Indiana and joined the World War II cadre, and they were asking us about, tell us about Iraq and F-18s. And we said, nobody cares about Iraq and F-18s. Tell us about Corsairs in World War II. And nobody cares about Corsairs in World War II. But it was really nice opportunity to connect with former members of that squadron. And it was through that process that I met Pat, and Pat and I became fast friends. He invited me to be in the organization, and I was excited to support. Didn't really know how I would support, but it aligned with my values, and so I agreed to do so. At the time, I was deploying quite a bit, and so it took me a while to go on my very first mission. But I came back from a deployment overseas, unpacked my sea bag, packed a suitcase, and joined the team in the nation of Palau, where we would spend a few weeks searching the jungles and waters for Americans missing in action. And it was on that very
searching for the remains of Americans missing in action.
Correct. Yeah, these were World War II losses. So yes, the remains and answers to provide to those families. And on my very first mission, I was a part of discovery in a very, very dense, thick mangrove. We located a site, and that site happened to be a World War II member of my squadron. And I was already engaged in this work and committed to this work, but at that time, it just really took it to a whole nother level. One, that this is a reality and this work can pay off like this. But I've actually made a connection across time with a former member of my unit, found them, and now we can provide answers to those families. And, at the time I didn't realize that this would be work that I would continue for the decades to come, and that I would end up, becoming president and CEO of this organization. But here we are today. And that was really those points were what led to me being where I'm at today.
Well, where is Palau? I don't know.
A lot of people aren't familiar with that. So it's a small nation in the South Pacific. It's about 500 miles to the southwest of Guam and another 500 miles east of the Philippines. So number of small islands, about 20,000 people live there. But some fierce fighting took place during World War II. There was an amphibious assault, but there was also 9 major air campaigns there, and a number of losses, and hundreds that were still missing after World War II and remain missing today.
As you tell the story, I mean, I assume the member of your squadron was not alive at the time. No, but you still were able to identify his remains on the island of Palau.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it starts with, we know certain sites that we're looking for. And typically we look for aviators, although we don't only look for aviators, because it's easier to find an aircraft that's been missing for decades than it is to find an individual. And once we find that aircraft, we determine what type of aircraft it is. And then once we know what type of aircraft it is, exactly which aircraft it is. And once we know that, we know the crew associated with it, or with that loss. And then we can determine if they're missing in action or not, and then work on a recovery.
I'm glad to get that clearer. It's the airplane that gets you.
Yeah. So even today, a lot of people, even people that have known me for a long time, introduce me and they say, "Hey, this is Derek, and he looks for lost aircraft." And I'm kind of left like, no, that's not what we look for. That's the means to the end. It's just, yeah, exactly that, a means.
Well, you need to be able to find the aircraft so you can identify the people in the aircraft,
right?
And be able to report about to family members more details about their deaths,
right?
And how and probably some idea even about how it happened. So
well,
you just
those families don't know anything. All they received was a telegram that said that their loved one was missing and is presumed dead. And MIA loss is different than somebody that's killed or died. When somebody dies, we know that they're gone. There's role changes that take place. There's ceremony around it. But when somebody goes missing, a lot of that stuff is put on pause. There's hope that their loved one is still alive. They fill the void with stories many times. This person becomes a mythical figure, and then that's passed from generation to generation. And we can provide true answers to that and allow that grieving process to continue, even though it might have stopped decades ago.
Yeah, that's what's so important in all this, is this what the value is to the family. And this value to the family seems to be a major driving force in you.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd say people tend to go through 3 phases when they become a member of our organization, and I've outlined 2 of them. The first one is, hey, this seems to align with my values. Maybe I can contribute in some way and become a member. And then the second phase, and for me, it was
wait a minute, that's a value. Maybe you contribute somehow. How?
Yeah. So the mission aligns with my values, or the individual's values, in the sense of never leave a service member behind, or providing answers to families, being a part of this greater community. And they might contribute their time, their expertise, their efforts in finding them and providing answers for these families. And
this is your way of honoring these servicemen,
yes,
and their families.
And, absolutely,
and to give back. And this is a passion of yours. I see it as we're talking about it. This is your deep feeling of wanting to be able to do this for the family members and for the servicemen themselves.
Absolutely. And not just mine, every member of our organization is passionate about it. And many in the community want to participate and provide their expertise and efforts and treasure to make it a reality. And then when it becomes a reality, that's really the second phase, because it could take years before you participate in a discovery or finding a site. And that moment is pretty incredible. All the blood, sweat, and tears that went into searching and gathering information and leading to that moment. Now it's a reality. You're looking at a site that maybe nobody's seen for 7, 8 decades, and what the outcome is going to be, that people are going to have answers to long held questions once we can provide that information to families. And so that's really the second phase of it, is, wow, this is real. And that's the experience that I had when we found that member of my squadron. Is not only is this real, wow, there's a direct connection to my own personal lineage and things like that.
Well, tell us about that. That was a meaningful coincidence for sure. That when you first started getting into recovery, you project recovery, at the beginning, kind of, you were part of a group that found somebody that was in your squadron.
Yeah.
And that's a meaningful coincidence in lots of ways. But from my perspective, lots of times coincidences happen during transition. And this was a transitional time for you. You had possibilities of your future. You were doing this because you felt it, you wanted, but somehow this really impacted you. Finding this guy in your squadron did something to you. Could you tell us about what that did to you?
Yeah. Leading up to the mission, I was doing my own research and preparing for going to Palau and searching these sites. And there were a number of people we were looking for. And I did note that, there's this member of my squadron that's missing, and wouldn't it be I don't know how that happened.
No, that's my fault. Go ahead.
But we were, in my mind, I was thinking, wouldn't it be incredible if we could somehow find this member of my squadron? Of course, no MIA is worth more than another, but for me, there was a personal connection to.
So you already had him in mind?
I did.
Wow.
But it didn't seem like a reality. It didn't
why did you have him in mind?
Because I knew about the losses, and I knew that my squadron had flown there and had losses there. And so
did you have this particular guy in mind?
I did.
Why? Why did you have?
I had been to this World War II reunion. I had met his squadron mates. We had served in we served in the same squadron, just decades apart. And Marines are, we take a lot of pride in our history. And so just there was this direct connection across time. And so, in my mind, I just kept on thinking, wouldn't it be incredible if we could find this site? And we didn't have a lot of information, but we had some information. And the information that we had pointed to this very, very dense mangrove jungle. And even finding something in that jungle it didn't seem like it was a possibility, because you could barely move through it. But we went in there, and our master guide, Joe, went on his own like he always does, and started combing the jungle. And we had some small radios, and he radioed back and says, I think I found something you might be interested in. And we got over to him, and sure enough, here's a piece of aircraft. And from there, we kind of fanned out and quickly found more and more and more of this aircraft, and quickly realized whose aircraft it was, and that it was this member of my squadron. And to pull on the coincidence string a little bit more, right after that, we get a phone call from the United States, and it's from the family of a gentleman named Walt Meyer. And I had met Walt Meyer at this World War II reunion. He was the squadron commander of that squadron in World War II. And the reason that his family was reaching out to us is they wanted to invite us to Walter's 90th birthday party. And we had to say, we can't come because we're in Palau. However, we would really love to connect with you when we get back. And we were able to go home and join Walter at his home just south of San Francisco and express, our happy birthday wishes. And at the same time, tell him that we found a missing member of his squadron. So, all these things just come together at one time is pretty incredible to be a part of. And it was life-changing for me. It was life-changing for Walter and every member of our team. So yeah, and I can't explain all the things that brought those the timing of all that together, but yeah, that's what happened.
That's what happened. Yeah, and that's what happens too. We want. I mean, my job is to try to explain some of these things, but you have to start with what happened. And I'll go to. I think you said his name was Joe, the guy who.
Well, Dang is saying, yeah.
Who could go through the mangrove groves to find stuff that you couldn't even move around in.
Yeah, so he's one with the jungle, that's for sure.
So he could feel the place, and that I call human GPS, the ability to get where you need to go without knowing how you get there.
It's funny you say GPS because we say it's JPS, Joe Positioning System, and he can feel the jungle. That's a great way to explain it, as well as the water. He notices things that are out of place much better than we do. And he's been instrumental in almost all of our discoveries in Palau.
and he has an ability which he probably can't describe, but he has a feeling as well as knowing, and he knows the jungle, he knows the water, but he has a feeling of the whole place and also where he wants to go. He can
Right.
put it in his mind, I want to get to this place, but I don't know where it is. And somehow he finds his way there. And that's what I call human or internal GPS.
Yeah.
And you call it JPS. It's a human capacity we all have that is potentially developed, can be developed by each of us. But he represents yet one other variation on the coincidence idea that I'm studying. Then there is the birthday call.
Right.
And I didn't get it straight, but when you say member of your squadron, you mean the same squadron, but decades previously.
Generation.
I thought it was somebody generations before. I didn't get that for a long time, because to you, it's all the same. I mean, there's no time there. You're part of the squadron, they're part of your squadron, even though they're generations apart.
It's very much a Marine mindset. Once Marine, always Marine. Anytime a Marine meets another Marine, it doesn't matter if one person is 18 years old and the other person is 80 years old. There's always an exchange and an acknowledgement of being fellow Marines. We say Semper Fidelis, it's a greeting. In many ways, always faithful, it's our motto. But when Marines meet each other across generations, that's something that we say to each other. It doesn't matter if we have known each other for years or it's the first time that we've met each other. There's that acknowledgement that we are part of the same group.
Semper Fidelis. Yes, yes, yes. Always faithful. Always faithful. Well, we're getting a better idea here, me and our audience, about where you're coming from. Remember, you're your first military guy, and Marines are not exactly the same as other people. And I've always known that too. But now I get a little better feeling for from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. I mean, I grew up, I love the cadence of that and the kind of worldness of it. So I had, as a boy, I had some feeling for what you're talking about, but here it is. So then there's, hey, Derek, want to come to a birthday party?
Right.
And that's right after you find the airplane and have some information about the squadron member, right?
Yes. And then, I mean, and it's not just that. 3 days later, we end up interviewing an elder in Palau. And, our interview tactics are not leading at all. We don't provide any leading questions or something like that. But this older gentleman starts telling us a story of when he was a young boy during World War II. And he watches an airplane crash into those mangroves. And we hadn't told him that we had located the site or anything, but he starts telling the story. And then after he finishes his story, well, we asked him, did the Japanese go into the mangroves afterwards to see if they could find the aviator or anything like that? And he said no. And then we said, well, has anybody over the years ever gone into those mangroves to search for that site or find that site? And he says, no, you'd have to be crazy to go into those mangroves. Nobody goes in there. And then once we completed the interview, we told him that we had found this site in those mangroves, and he thought we were the craziest people ever. But of course, we didn't find the eyewitness before we found the site. We found the eyewitness after we found the site, which was, but no matter what, we found it, and he provided some confirming information.
Well, kind of makes you wonder, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, wouldn't happen to make you feel a little guided or anything, would it?
Oh yeah. Well, we've had so many different cases like this, and we always say in Project Recover that we don't believe in coincidences, and we've said that so many times over the years because of stories like this. And one time, a family member at an event said, "Well, they're not coincidences; they're angel taps, and you should just be listening to them." And so that's a term that we've coined from that family member, just because we think it sums it up in so many ways. But when you're seeing these things occur over and over again, maybe you should start paying more attention to
them. I wonder if you might say that again, sir.
Well, it's the consciousness piece that you talk about, right? So being conscious to it, aware of them, and maybe they're pointing you in a direction you should pay attention to.
Well, that's fundamental to what I'm doing. You got it. Pay more attention to them, but to have us know that U.S. Marine Corps is into meaningful coincidences for whatever cause we might explain them with, uh, but that you're doing them is like really a good expansion, because I figure they happen to human beings. It doesn't matter what you belong to, and to me, the one of the driving forces is the cohesiveness of the Marines and the passion you feel for other Marines, so that you're in a group that has a mind that's separate over time as well as space, and that you're all part of it. And that interconnectedness is established. It's in your hearts as well as your minds. And I think that's a fundamental element that allows these coincidences to happen. Not the only explanation, but I haven't really been able to hear of a group mind like this that's so determinedly connected and has an objective in mind. I've not had that experience as close as playing football, and that's not the same. It's an idea of it, but it's something like it. So I appreciate hearing you and have some idea, as I just tried to describe, what contributes to it. You got hit in the face with it. Here it was. And mangroves grow in water.
Yeah, it's right on the edge of the water, so it's a swampy type of area. So right on the edge of the islands, or as where the island meets the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. So that's we're not going to go into like how you got there, actually, even though JPS got you there. Uh, it's it's let's say it's a difficult trek, let's say.
Yes, and you ask our members that have spent time in there, we can try and explain what the mangroves are like, but you can never accurately put it into words. And it always exceeds expectations once people find themselves in that environment.
By exceeding expectations, you mean even more difficult than you
Right.
described.
Right. A lot of the comments are like, "Wow, you weren't lying about this. This is worse than I thought it was going to be."
Well,
So we talked about the Marine Corps, but that mindset is really what drives Project Recover. And not all of us are former military. A number of our members are former military or active military or have some sort of connection to that. But they're not all that. They're just people that are completely committed to this mission. And it is that exact common mindset that drives us on this mission. And we listen to those coincidences that are not like coincidences at all, but angel taps as we refer to them, and other things, and see where they take us and how they might guide us in completing this mission. And many times over they've assisted with that.
What you've come to do very clearly is to expect these angel taps.
Mm-hmm.
You've come to expect them.
Right. Yeah. And we're not surprised by them at all anymore. Where other people might say, wow, that's an incredible coincidence. We just say, of course.
My reaction is that's baseball, but that's not what you call it. Just the way it is.
Right.
It's part of reality, and I'm trying to be able to have anybody who listens and people outside to recognize what you've recognized and what your colleagues recognize. These are part of our reality, and we can use them to accomplish things that we want to accomplish, as you're talking about, to feel more connected to our environment and the people who are involved with us, and also to help sharpen our purpose in life. You were wondering what you were going to do with yourself. You have leadership training. You probably had enough of being in just a regular Marine, or as if you were one, but you wanted to do something else. And then the beginnings of Project Recovery and you got together, and the happy accident that has led to our discussion. And then once all those things happen, you become used to having meaningful coincidences happen. and they help you. They've helped you, but they help other people also find a purpose in life.
Absolutely.
And that's a major idea I'm trying to suggest, what you represent, that.
And it's impacted my life in different ways. I have a personal mission statement, if you will, and it's to have a positive impact on as many people as I can throughout my lifetime. And what that impact is subjective, but how I've let that guide me is when doors are open for me, and that could be coincidences, or opportunities or things like that. I don't ignore them, but I'll put a little energy into those opportunities as they present themselves. And if they allow me to grow my sphere of influence in a positive way, then I put more and more and more energy into them. And that's happened with Project Recover. This door presented itself. I didn't shut it. I walked through it and explored the opportunity. And now it's growing to, helping create impact across the world, especially with these Gold Star MIA families, when their loved one is returned to them or we provide answers to them. But then it's also happened in other places in my life as well. I work a lot in higher education space.
I want to find out about these other parts of your life where it also happens. But I also want to emphasize what you just said, is that you see them as hints or clues of perhaps something that you might be able to do, something that will be the next step in your life. It's a door that opens, and you decide to walk through it. And that's so important. A lot of people have coincidences that are potential doors that they don't walk through.
Right.
And you have learned, yes, I see this. I'm going to walk through this. And you've learned to be able to trust them. Now, one of the funny questions I like to ask is in a circumstance like this, because I ask myself, sometimes coincidences aren't doors you want to walk through. Sometimes there's a potential problem there. Can you relate to that?
Yeah. Well, so the door isn't always an opportunity, but it's something worth exploring. So maybe it's a caution, maybe it's a hint of some sort. So if somebody reaches out to me about something and I'm not really sure what it is, I'm always kind of, well, I'm open to the conversation and start the conversation. And maybe that opens up more and more doors, or maybe that's the end of it, or it's not something that I'm going to explore anymore, or it's a shift or a pivot into another direction. But I'm willing to explore what it might be. And what I've seen is, and it's kind of counter to what a lot of people think. So when I hear people talk about, what's your passion? For me, going through these doors have exposed me to what my passion is. And because for me, it's more of a general sense. It's a positive impact. And I acknowledge that that's subjective to me, but again, it's my life. So that's fine. So, this has become my passion because of the impact that we've been able to create. And it's also manifested in other parts of my life. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, what are your passions? I wouldn't be able to point to these things and these impacts that are being created today. But I'll start with those opportunities or those doorways.
This is so important in what I'm trying to say, Derek, and what you're saying. You're kind of giving voice in your way to that, the idea that you open these doors and you find your passion, and has happened with you outside of Project Recovery. Could you give us an example of that from outside?
Yeah. I work also quite a bit in the higher education space, specifically with the military population. And I grew up raised by a single mom, didn't graduate high school, who died when I was very young. And so then as I was growing up and becoming an adult, education became kind of success to me and something that I sought and found. And then with that, I had an impact, or the ability to make an impact in the higher education space. And it was another coincidence that occurred. I got sent by the Marine Corps to attain my master's degree. And at the time, I had been deploying across the world quite a bit. And when the opportunity presented itself, initially, I just saw it as a break from consistent deployments. And so I returned from the Middle East. I started this master's program, and I was thinking, okay, I'm just going to take a break. Well, 3 weeks into it, I was like, well, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with this education to make a difference. And the timing, of course, was when there was a huge influx of military into higher education. And I saw that I could speak military. I was learning about the higher education, and so I could be I could work that boundary in working with the military. And so I started doing research on what institutions were doing with the military on their campuses or weren't doing, and then created a thesis around that. Well, that translated because I put the energy into that and more opportunities. And so when I first left the service, I started working in higher education and running military programs at the University of San Diego, at San Diego State University, and was able to have a positive impact on those military connected students on those campuses. And really, that wouldn't have occurred had that timing not been there, or had I not been open to exploring that further.
That timing had not occurred. Another very common form of coincidences is being in the right place at the right time.
Oh, we're very familiar with quote unquote luck when it comes to Project Recover and finding success on our missions.
Well, I'm not sure I want to wander into luck with you right now, but we could. You could call this luck that your military the military background, your education interest, and then the influx of military people into the schools was luck. You can call that luck. And the different names, I'm not going to try to explanations. I'm not going to try to do so much with you. We'll say with luck and angel taps.
Yeah.
Because I have my own ideas about them, but just the richness of your coincidence experience is what's so wonderful about all this. So it can expand our viewers' idea that they happen in all walks of life under the right conditions with the right person. I mean, you have to be what you are, which and probably always have been, is like curious and with a big heart of trying to help. And so you're curious about how you could help. And you walked into this world with that in you. And for various reasons, you came out with those two things in you, curious and a heart to help. And there you were looking. You have been looking. You have been willing to look around and see what opportunities there might be there. And luck, according to Louis Pasteur, among others, is when opportunity meets preparation. Right. And you were looking for an opportunity that you were prepared to do, but you weren't sure what it was. I like to add to that, and you're moving around. You got to be like, having things happening for you around you so that you can see something happening. So your luck, at least in this education one, was you had an opportunity and you grasped it and went for it.
Absolutely.
And that's your life, I'm going to say.
Yeah. And I mean, and that's kind of I don't know if it's a routine, but it's just the way I go about business, really, as far as my personal life and what I'm trying to do with my life and the impacts that I'm trying to create. Sometimes I don't know what those impacts are, but when the opportunity presents itself, and like you said, I've prepared myself and I'm the instrument to assist, then I'll utilize my expertise, my energy, and my efforts to
well, that's an important little phrase that you're the instrument. That's all right, Derek. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the preparation part, right? I mean, I think I'm an instrument to make change in a positive way throughout the world. I provided or prepared myself to be available to that and to make a difference. And that's been through educating myself and creating expertise in certain areas and expanding my voice and things like that. And so in this case, the higher education opportunity presented itself. And so it's like, well, as I kind of presented it, I could speak Marine or I could speak military, and then the language and jargon between the military and higher education are a little different. But I could literally be the Rosetta Stone, if you will, across that boundary, that would help these military members and their family members that are seeking higher education find it and find success in it, and hopefully that led to their own success in the areas that they want to be successful in. And really that's what I am. I'm that instrument or that cog in that boundary that would help with those. And I would continue to improve myself to be the best instrument possible. And it's the same thing with Project Recover. I'm in this role as president and CEO. I'm consistently trying to improve myself to be the best instrument possible to not only find my own success, but find success of the organization, success of our mission, and provide answers for these families.
It reminds me of a phrase that's been out there for a while. Be the change that you want to see. Right. And you've given me a little different idea about that. Be changing the way you want change to take place. It's not just be.
It's not stagnant. No,
it's not stagnant. Yes, it's keep developing yourself. So being the change you want to see is out there is not a stagnant thing. It is something you can keep working on.
There is a foundation, though. The foundation is, personal values, and then harnessing that my work to that, so that when distractions come in, we were talking a little bit about, are these doorways always opportunities, or are they other things? So when sometimes they can be distractions, and if they are that, are they drawing me away from that foundation, or are they reinforcing that foundation and opening more opportunities? And so the stagnant part of it is the foundation, and then growing from that.
Well, it's not stagnant. That's fixed. I'd rather call it fixed. Right. Stagnant implies
stagnant. Yeah, that's right. That's a better word.
This is the foundational. I mean, that's, and I share a foundational set too. And we all need to have a foundation of values in how to utilize the meaningful coincidences that come into our life, rather than using them in some kind of perverted way from your major direction. Use them, all of them, all the weird stuff that can happen, even if it might seem like it's not there, but use it. Oh, wait a minute, how can I use it? It's all there around me. I just have to figure out how I can use it, even if it's something that I know I should stay away from. That's telling me something too about where the boundaries are from what I am doing. I'll try this out. And I've done this too many times where I open a door and say, oops. And you've had to have that too. That's how you learn.
Right. That's a learning opportunity.
It's a learning opportunity. It's always a learning opportunity. Learn to discern is a nice little rhyme we can put together today, that you have learned to be able to do.
Doing my best, continue to learn. That's for sure.
Well, if you don't continue, then you're going to get stagnant. You've got to, if as long as you're alive, you got to keep moving. It's like the cops telling the guy who's trying to sleep in the sidewalk, keep moving. Yeah, I identify with some of those guys who are sleeping out there on the cold, when they got to keep moving, because I've had I know what that's like, and it's like, keep moving. And that's what you're doing. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
How does your experience with being the leader, the president and CEO of Project Recover, how does your involvement with Angel Taps influence the people around you?
Well, of course, I can't take full credit for that. I think we have an organization full of leaders, and I don't think of leadership as positional. Of course, I'm in this position, so it does make a difference. But I think
you've got to do that humble thing. I realize that. Right. I mean, and you've got to, and that's right, because you're part of a team and part of a group, and each one of them is making a contribution. And to be a leader like that, you've got to be okay. So what you just said, but let's talk about. I'm sorry to tell you, Derek, but human beings like to look up to the leader
Yeah.
as much as they like to smash the leader down. Also, uh, both of them are there as part goes with the territory.
Yeah.
But how they know how you think about angel taps
Yeah.
because you're not going to not tell them.
No, and so and I think of it too as innovation. We're an innovative organization. We do have a foundation that's fixed, and that has guided us as we have grown and scaled the organization. But when I think about angel taps and what that means for the work that we do, is is really in the space of innovation. Like, how do we continue to grow, continue to be creative, continue to learn, try new things to be the best possible organization and execute this mission in the best way possible. And we are consistently learning, and so that's something that I try to display and also try to tell the members of our organization we need to be innovative. And so if you want people to be innovative, um, you have to give them the room to do that. And you also have to give them the room to fail, because the first time they trip up and stumble or they don't find success when they're trying something new, they're going to immediately look at you and see how you react. And if I react in a negative way or try and really hammer that nail down or so, well, they're never going to be innovative again, right? They're just going to stay in their box and their lane. And we're not going to grow as individuals, and we're not going to grow as an organization. And we have certainly done that. And I hope that I'm displaying that in the right way and encouraging that in the right way from my position. And I think with the success that we have, that is occurring. We've expanded our capability significantly over the years, in technological ways, but also just in our own protocols. And so going back to my own personal story of, hey, I have this foundation and I'm open to, the doors when they present themselves. I see similar things within the organization. We have a foundation that is our mission, vision, and values. As we've scaled and we weren't sure what direction we were going to go, we would go back to that foundation and that would guide our answers, but we would be open to these coincidences, opportunities, angel taps when they presented themselves. That's allowed us to continue to be successful, but also be innovative and grow in our own way, and just expand this mission, expand the impact, and continue to grow.
The idea of allowing people to make mistakes and be fluid in how they get out there and make things happen for themselves is a vital aspect of serendipity, serendipity particularly, but synchronicity also. But the idea of being able to find new ideas is what serendipity tends to be about, where you can figure, where you are wanting to discover something, but you don't know what it is. It's like you kind of have an idea, you can recognize it, but not until it appears do you see that that's something you want to be able to do. In order to do that, you said that so well, Derek, is like if you keep people structured and if you keep yourself structured, I mean, it's vital to say it's about yourself too.
Oh, absolutely.
If you miss stuff that might come in because you got a wall around you, but if you allow yourself to like be open, like one guy would complain that universities took away the Friday afternoon when researchers could just do whatever they wanted instead of following a protocol, rigidly doing what you're supposed to do, but just had Friday afternoons to just mess around in the lab and see what happens. Once that got lost, serendipity in laboratories became less likely because you just had to follow the protocol. And you're applying that very beautifully, really, very beautifully, because it's clear about how you're doing that as a leader of Project Recovery.
Well, and sometimes, and this has happened to me over and over again, where somebody presents an idea and my initial reaction is like, well, one, I never thought about that, and that sounds really crazy, or something. I don't know if this is going to be successful, but being willing to not say that, just internally process that, but then say, okay, well, let's try it, and see what happens. And I've been proven wrong in my mind many, many times over, where I didn't think that that was necessarily the best route to go, but somebody comes in with a different idea and you're open to it. And next thing you know, it exposes more and more and more. And that's one of those opportunities that if you just ignored or you shut the door, you missed out.
Well, that's fairly basic what you just described for what a leader
It's
should do.
basic, but it's hard.
It's
It's hard.
hard. It's hard.
It's
And
easy to talk about leadership. It's difficult to practice.
do you mind if I agree with you?
I hope so.
Well, that's why we get paid the big bucks, right? Well, that's why we get to do what we really enjoy doing,
Right.
and be able to like have multiplied impact. So, and that's your idea, and it's mine too, with the Coincidence Project, to have increasing impact. And you have such a nice sense of this coincidence thing because you live it, and it's like, well, okay, you're a fish in water. What's the difference? I mean, I didn't know I was in it really exactly, but unless you fly out of the water for a second like a flying fish. Oh, marine, you're a marine. Water. Now I understand. You fly and
Yeah.
you go underneath. The Navy tries to do something like that, but they don't. And the Army is walking around on the Earth, and they try to do other things too. But you guys started as like uh, terrestrial amphibians. You're an amphibian, so you can fly above and you can look below. You can be part of it, and you can be looking at what's going on. That's just my way of thinking about it. You're doing it remarkably well. You're welcome. And I kind of know what I'm talking about because I'm studying these things. And to find you doing this in a very active kind of like, what's the big deal way, it's like, this is just what we do. I mean, it is not that easy sometimes, but that's what you do. It's kind of surprising and refreshing. And it's nice that you're military because military really is, doing it in a clear way that you can communicate with each other about. And you've got that. You've developed that clarity, which I could get to with playing football and baseball. Is kind of a little similar. You just want to know how to do it, and you're doing it.
Well, we're going to keep on doing it. That's
Well, you don't have a choice.
That's right.
I mean, this is you. And do you help other people in your organization find their purpose within the organization and even without? Because some probably have to leave to do something else to do their passion.
We're a volunteer-based organization, so we have a number of people that have obviously their lives outside of our organization, but then they fill their purpose bucket, if you will, with Project Recover. And so maybe the day-to-day life of building cogs or whatever it is isn't providing that impact or that legacy that they want, but they find that with Project Recover. And so we intentionally build leaders in the organization. So it's not just me or the other people that have been in this organization for a while that are leading teams on these missions. It's the newer members, it's people that are up and coming, it's people that are expressing interest and capabilities that we're putting into those roles so that they can grow within the organization and find the same success and the impact that they want to have. And so we pay attention to that and do what we can to put people into positions that will allow them to be successful, grow, and be innovative and all sorts of different things
Within the organization.
But then I think that there's a ripple effect to that, right? You learn that and then you can apply that into the other areas of your life, just like I apply it in multiple areas across my life, not just Project Recover, but I mentioned I still do work in the higher education space. I still donate my time to other people and other organizations and my community because it's important to me. And if I can find a way to be successful in one space and translate it to something else that I care about, then I'm certainly going to do so.
Well, you have something, Derek, that I continue to encourage you to do. And, I'm selling a book. Okay, I'm out there selling a book, you know that. But uh, if the people are interested in how to think conceptually about what you're doing, Meaningful Coincidences could be a book to help some people. And maybe even if you would take a look at it, it's like to see if there's stuff in there that helps you further conceptualize what you're doing, because you have run across the angel taps, the meaningful coincidences, in your way, and why and how and who knows, but you're there, and I'm so interested in what you're doing and how you stumbled across it in your way, that I want to be able to encourage even more what you're doing already. And that's what my book is intended to be able to do, is to help structure and say, this isn't just happening in Project Recover. This is just something Derek does or something I do. This is something that human beings do and can get better at. And it may not be necessary because you're doing it well, but I would like to see how what I've written matches or informs even more what you're doing. I'm very interested if you would.
Well, I look forward to reading it. I am an avid reader, and I think that's important to do. Not only to learn, but to read about experiences and live vicariously and learn vicariously through those experiences. Whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I learned something from every single book that I read.
Oh, nonfiction and fiction can be really informative. There's no question.
I'm reading a piece of fiction right now, and I find a lot of learning points in that. But no, I look forward to giving it a read.
Well, if and when you do, please get back to me, because it might be worth another conversation to see what is happening with you, because you're a gem for me in this business. Someone who's just kind of running around there doing his life, who's doing meaningful coincidences in such a good way, in such a pragmatic and heartfelt way. It's such a combination of what I'm trying to be able to see happen, and you're doing it. So I want to keep in touch with how you're doing it and see what happens to you reading my book, and maybe other people reading it, and maybe even discussing it sometime, because my mission is to do something like what you're doing, but you have a very clear mission. Mine is to get people to be more sensitive to coincidences and use them, something like what you're doing. So you're a model in the world of what I'm trying to help people do.
Well, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Well, good. I do too. And so we're coming to the end of this, but maybe you could leave us with a little something about Derek Abbey. I couldn't stop thinking about Downton Abbey, because you've probably heard that before. Where is Derek Abbey, and is it outside of London someplace?
No, I'm up in Bend, Oregon. So we just had our first snow here yesterday. I'm enjoying the mountains being covered in white, and the break in the temperature. But I'm right here in the smack dab in the middle of Oregon, just on the eastern slope of the Cascade Mountains.
And I was in Seattle for 10 years, so I have a little idea of what
That's
it's
where
like
I'm from
there.
originally.
Okay, well, let's stop here, but we'll talk a little bit about that. So Derek Abbey, thank you very much for being with me on the show, and very much appreciate being able to talk with you and find out what you are up to, which is wonderful to hear.
Thank you, Bernard. I enjoyed it.
This psychosphere is our mental atmosphere, like a hologram of cosmic consciousness.